Hey there, we are back. You are listening to Flash Forward, a Defenders of the Earth retrospective. I'm your host, Patrick Cadigan. Join me as I revisit each episode of the series, breaking down the stories, characters, themes, and maybe digging just a bit into the lore that gave this series its moment in 80s animated television. Whether you're a longtime fan who remembers watching its first run, or discovering the show for the first time and wondering how you ever missed it to begin with, this is your chance to flash forward and back into a world of heroes, villains, and gloriously 80s retro action adventure. So let's get started. All right, so last time we sat down for the pilot episode, Escape from Mongo, and now we are hitting episode 2, The Creation of Monitor. I have the air date as Tuesday, September 9th, 1986, and this episode was written by Mel Gilden. Now, Mr. Gilden's credits, according to IMDb, include in the 80s, he was a writer for He-Man, Mask, and the Centurions. As he transitioned into the 90s, he was a writer for James Bond Jr., The Mask, and Phantom 2040. Now, in this episode, we're going to see all the usual characters. We're going to have Flash Gordon, the Phantom, Mandrake, the Magician, and Lothar. Along with their kids, we're going to see all of them again. We've got Rick Gordon, Jetta Walker, LJ, or Lothar Jr., and Kashin. For the bad guys, we're going to primarily see Ming the Merciless, Gyrax, and the supercomputer Octon. We now will be, quote-unquote, formally introduced to Dynak X, the central AI computer, Zuffy the space alien, the famous space alien. But then we're also introduced to Morcon of the Krell, alien construction allies that we will meet for this episode. So let's dive in and get started. Act 1. Ming the Merciless tells Octon of his frustrations by the slow progress of his station built on Earth and wants his robot forces to accelerate. Suddenly, a warning alert flashes and the two observe an unknown fleet of ships bearing down on Earth. Ming orders Octon to break into their code to figure out who the mysterious fleet might actually be. Meanwhile, at Mandrake's mansion, the young defenders wait as Rick Gordon prepares to activate Dynak X, the most advanced computer ever built. Mandrake reveals that Dynak X is unique because it contains the human essence of Rick's mother, hitherto this point unnamed Dale Arden, preserved in a crystal. We get a quick flashback of Zuffy the space alien retrieving the crystal, which we saw in episode 1. Flash gives Rick the go-ahead to activate the computer. Kashin muses that perhaps the team could use the newly christened computer to help find a permanent headquarters as Mandrake's mansion, Xanadu, is insufficient for global defense. LJ counters that Xanadu is fine, but Flash jumps in with a quick retort.
But it doesn't have what we need to defend the Earth.
We need a real head.
A homesick Jetta tells her father, the Phantom, that she misses their home, the Skull Cave. Suddenly, a warning alarm flashes and Dynak X alerts the team to a cadre of incoming ships that are, as of yet, unidentified. Back at Ming's headquarters, Octon relays that code from the transmission is linked to Flash Gordon. Ming instantly orders the transmission to be traced. Flash recognizes the ship fleet and welcomes Morcon of the Krell, a friendly alien race who have arrived to help build the new base. Morcon refers to Flash as old friend. Morcon asks if the team has created a name for their new base. Flash answers, the future base will be referred to as Monitor, from which they will be able to monitor Ming's activities. Unknown to the team, Ming is listening in to their transmission with the Krell and overhears Flash reiterate the name of the team as Defenders of the Earth. At Ming's insistence, Octon orders Gyrax to follow the Krell to the Defenders' location and then launches an attack, nearly destroying the Dynak X unit before the heroes can retaliate in their own starships. Immediately, Ming forces begin firing on the Krell, and Flash realizes their transmission has been compromised. He orders Rick to include more shielding to protect the computer. Morcon implores Flash to assist against the attack, and he jumps into his attack ship and races to battle. At one point, Garax recognizes that the location the Krell were traveling to is Xanadu and prepares to attack the mansion directly. However, Mandrake intervenes with an illusion that the mansion is floating toward Garax's ship. Garax manages to retreat, but one of the robot ships is destroyed by the illusion. At one point, an overexcited Kashin encourages Flash to beat out Ming's forces, but he's almost instantly admonished by Mandrake and sent away. Kashin quickly leaves the area, and Mandrake calls out to him, but Kashin still exits. Lothar dismisses the incident, telling his friend that Ming might be easier to deal with than teenagers. Meanwhile, Flash continues to battle the robot army in the sky. Kashin and Zuffy manage their way to a cliff outside of Xanadu to watch the skirmish. At one point, Kashin sees Flash might be in trouble and calls out to him to look out. Kashin picks up a rock, hurling it at one of the attack ships, which then blows up. Even Kashin seems surprised at that, but gets a knowing glance of thanks from Flash. They are all in this together, after all. Kashin attempts to make a quick exit, but the robo-ship destroys the cliff path in front of him. Back at Xanadu, Rick warns his father of an ongoing onslaught of fighters. Being a master pilot and warrior, Flash is patient and leads the robot fighters into a path that is obscured by the light of the sun. At this point, Flash and the Krell swoop in and destroy the invaders. Kashin and Zuffy continue to watch the battle from the cliff, and Ming, observing him through the transmission, orders Garax to take him alive so that Ming can use him as a lure for the Defenders. Act 2. Robot sentries drop from their ship to go after Zuffy and Kashin. Zuffy seemingly finds a cave the two can escape to. However, the sentries blast a hole big enough for themselves and pursue the two. In their escape, Kashin realizes the cavern is immense and the two continue to evade the robots. However, at one point they appear cornered at another cliff. The robots are upon them, but the cliff gives way, and Zuffy and Kashin fall off the cliff and land on an embankment just outside a pit of lava. The robot sentries attempt to pursue, however, they get caught in the molten lava and begin to fire their ray guns erratically. Before being succumbed by the lava, one of the blaster bolts hits the cave wall and reveals yet another cavern to which Kashin and Zuffy attempt to make another escape. As it turns out, the two end up in the wine cellar of Xanadu, where Zeta and Kisa find them. They're safe, for now. With the team and the Krell back together at Xanadu, Dynak X analyzes the cavern and determines it's large enough for a city. Flash says that it would be a perfect base, and Mandrake gives Kashin credit for the discovery, saying he'll make a good defender, but adds that he needs to follow orders. Dynak X interjects and warns that the mountain is a semi-active volcano. Jeddah jumps in to say that the volcano can be capped and the power can be harnessed to give them unlimited energy, which they're going to need if they plan to fight Ming. After an indeterminate period of time, with the help of the Krell, a series of structures is now present in the cavern, one of which will serve as the cap of the volcano. At one point, the Phantom becomes concerned about Jeddah, and when he questions her, she again reiterates that she doesn't think that she'll be happy because they are away from their home. The Phantom tells her that she cannot return to their African village by herself, and that he is worried about her future. Ming, infuriated by his initial failure, sends Garax and a phalanx of ice robots to infiltrate the mountain and destroy the base from within. Octon tells Ming that there has been a massive energy detected at the initial area of attack, and Ming surmises that this must be the Defenders' headquarters. Garax requests that he be allowed to attack again, only this time from inside the base. The ice robots attack, trapping the Defenders' ships inside the mountain. The heroes must fight on foot using Mandrake's magic and the Phantom's strength to repel the machines. Act 3. Having caused a cave-in, the robot sentries continue their attack, damaging the structures. Flash attempts to use one of the Krell's laser cutters and use them against the sentries. As the Phantom, Lothar, Mandrake, and Jeddah watch in disbelief, the Phantom steps up with an idea to use the sentries' advantages against them. Calling on the power of 10 tigers, based on jungle law, the Phantom swoops into action, drawing their attention and fire, with the robots following the Phantom. Flash douses them with concrete, which finishes their attack, for now. Back at Ming's fortress, Ming seemingly forgives Garax and reiterates to Octon his desire to have the base destroyed permanently. At Monitor, Dynak X tells the team the damage isn't permanent, but once again, Ming's forces show up to do damage. However, Lothar has Dynak X broadcast a fake SOS to the top of the volcano. Garax falls for the ruse and blasts the top of the volcano, which creates an opening that the defenders needed. The team raise the crown through the newly created opening. As this takes place, Rick encloses the base of the crown with water, thus presenting their camouflage. Once accomplished, the team, with the continued aid of the Krell, launch their attack fighters to go after the robo-sentries. During this battle, one of the sentry ships crashes into the mountain, causing a break, which has a cascade effect on the base power supply, and they begin to lose energy and blow the volcano. Utilizing her telepathic link, Jada sends Kisa into a narrow shaft to plant a relief explosive. The resulting explosion appears to Ming as a volcanic eruption, and he assumes the base, along with the defenders in it, have been destroyed. Again, Jetta relays to the Phantom that she does not want to stay at Monitor. The Phantom, once again, reminds her of the promise he made for the two of them. Rick submerges the crown back into the volcano and is masked by the water present at the apex. The defenders eject construction debris with the intent to convince Ming that the base was in fact destroyed. Fooled, Ming retreats, believing his enemies are dead, even though Octon tells him that there is still quite a bit of residual energy coming from the mountain. Ming, however, continues to gloat in the idea of his victory. As the team inspect the damage that has been done, Morcon brings everyone down into a newly created part of the mountain's cavern. Heat and steam present create an atmosphere that remains at a constant 88-degree temperature. This, Jetta points out, is a similar climate to their home, and the Phantom muses about the creation of a second Skull Cave. Back at Ming's base, he notes that the Krell are leaving the area, and once again, Octon has to point out that not only is Flash Gordon alive, but he is also escorting the Krell out. Ming swears that Flash will not be alive for much longer. The end. So yeah, this episode definitely moved at a very, very quick pace. Much more so, I feel like, than the last episode. I think one of the things as I was watching it over and over again, one of the things that struck me was that it is this, essentially there is no sense of time here. All right. So we get the 80s trope of the introduction of the aliens, and then surprisingly, they're going to offer all of this, super advanced technology. But, the Krell show up, they figure out that the mountain is going to be a pretty good base for them. And then it literally goes to the next frame, and 3/4 of the whatever structure that they're going to need is already right there. Just again, just no sense of time. And then the other thing that I picked up on was when Ming is in this constant state of attack, right? It's he attacks, it doesn't work out. Well, then 2 minutes later, he's we're going to attack again. And then that doesn't work out. And then boom, we're going to attack again. It didn't bother me. It was just one of those things that, again, in 80s cartoon fashion, it's just things just keep moving. There's not a lot of exposition there. It's just bam, one thing after the other, after the other, after the other. One thing that I did catch, obviously, I've talked about it before, the revolving door that is Mandrake's powers. And in the scene where he runs outside and he recognizes that the ships are bearing down on the mansion, and then does this illusion where the mansion is floating up into the sky. Well, Garrick sees this and he flies off, but one of the other planes was destroyed. So then that, in my brain is okay, so wait a second, is this an illusion? Or, did this actually happen? Does the illusion have mass? So, I mean, apparently it does because it destroyed the ship. We could explain it away in 80s fashion and say that, perhaps there was a plane, a Krell ship behind him that fired on that particular ship. But I'm going to say that, no, it was the illusion. It was the illusion that destroyed the ship. So, again, apparently Mandrake's illusions have mass. One of the other tropes that I picked up from this particular episode is that emotional core of Dynak X, which is the presentation of a loved one's soul within technology by them using Rick's mother, in essence, to power the base and the computer. The computer essentially becomes it's not a tool anymore. It's essentially a member of the family and, could eventually provide like a moral compass for the tool, or moral compass for the team. So we will see. Maybe I'm reading far too into it, but I feel like as we move on, we'll see what that looks like. It was interesting to me. I gave a lot of thought to how, again, we've always heard about AI. I can remember it from a long time ago, but it's interesting now to see where we are at right now versus what they were thinking about, 20, 30 years ago. And for me, it's a lot of fun to, okay, what did they get right versus what did they get wrong? So I don't know. We'll see how that goes. There was a lot of intergenerational conflict here also. The continued struggles of this younger cast. Again, they're trying to establish these characters, essentially giving them an arc of something to do. Kashin, I feel like got the shaft in this episode. He was being a kid, right? And he's jumping up and down and he's all excited, hey, he's seen the great Flash Gordon, this is great. But then is immediately admonished by his parental unit, Mandrake, who kind of sends him away. What are you thinking, kid? Get out of here. But then eventually finds his own way, so to speak, quite literally in this episode, finds his own way. He basically makes a mistake, but that leads to a good thing. This discovery of this cavern in this huge mountain. So worked out for him. The Jeddah storyline was her. I did think it was funny how the only thing that she had to do in this episode was to constantly go back to her father and be like, oh, I'm so unhappy. And then, of course, by the end of the episode, now we have a solution. We are planning to have a second skull cave, but no, they needed that resolution. She got it, so that is something that they're going to do as we move forward. One of the other things that struck me about this episode was the use of geothermal energy because again, when I think of geothermal, I know that it's an old. It's essentially, this is a science that's been around for a long, long time. But I did think it was kind of cool how they employed it in this episode. And that, again, gave this a sense of an ecological message. A message, again, they're the defenders of the earth. They are protecting the earth. Well, so, this is a new energy. It's a raw harnessing of energy. I don't pretend to understand how it all works, but I did think that it was really cool how they did that. I thought that was a good idea. It gave them a solid base from which to start. I also thought it was interesting how essentially they used a principle from The Art of War that instead of trying to outgun Ming, Lothar kind of jumps in and outthinks him. So, I mean, again, it was a fairly simple solution, but using the destruction from the volcano piece, and then hiding it as an eruption, and then throwing out debris to kind of cloak the fact that they were still around. Again, outthinking versus trying to fight him. So it was good stuff. Like I said, this episode, I enjoyed it. It moved at a very brisk pace, so they definitely kept things going. So now we're going to move on to the episode trivia. For this episode, this was the first to feature the alternate introduction, in which at the title, at the very end of the intro sequence, it zooms into the distance in a different way. So in the very first episode, it was one way, and then now this is moving forward. This is going to be how we see that sequence. As in the first episode, they are continuing in that Flash Gordon's wife is never named. They refer to her mom, wife, but they never actually say Dale Arden, even though we know who she is. One of the interesting things, I was actually reviewing the Star Comics issue 1, and in that issue, there was a single frame of that. It was essentially explaining who Flash Gordon was in a single frame. It was in this picture, he's standing there. He looks like a mighty guy. He's got a gun in his hand. But in that visual, there is also Dale Arden, again, unnamed, but you know who she is. And the other one that I caught was Dr. Zarkov. Now, Zarkov never shows up in this series, or at least not that I know of as of yet, but he was in at least one frame. He was in one frame of the comic book, and I just thought that was a great homage to that. For those people who were unfamiliar with the Flash Gordon mythos, when we are first introduced to Flash Gordon, we're introduced to him, and then, of course, we meet Dale Arden, the person who eventually becomes his wife. But then there was essentially a trio in that original storyline, and it was Dr. Hans Zarkov, so he was that third person, so it was always the three of them together. I have not read the comic book yet all the way through, but I did appreciate from the first couple of pages that I was reviewing, that they used the medium in a way that, was able to tell essentially the same story, but just telling it a little bit differently. So I really appreciated that. Again, as I had talked about before, this is Mandrake performing one of the most impressive feats, which is convincing Ming's invading forces that his entire mansion is floating in the sky. Again, does that mansion have mass? Well, apparently it does. Now, one of the other things that I picked up on, the Krell, that is the name. All right, for longtime science fiction fans, here you go. The Krell was the name of the empire that destroyed themselves from the movie Forbidden Planet from 1956. That was a movie that starred Leslie Nielsen and Walter Pidgeon. And it was funny because as I was watching the episode, when I heard Krell, it was like, why does that sound familiar? And it was about halfway through that my memory was jarred, and I was like, yeah, that's Forbidden Planet. So I have no way of knowing if that was intentional. However, these writers, it would not surprise me if that was intentional, and moving forward, we're going to see other homages to old science fiction as well. But that was something that I did pick up on. One of the other things that I noted was that the design of the fighter ships, it more so in this episode, I feel like it was clearly evident that this model was the one that was used in the creation of the toy version. And it's actually a pretty good likeness. So for those who don't know, there was a toy line put out by Galoob, which include the main figure. It didn't have the kids. It was only the main figures, Flash, Lothar, Mandrake, Ming, and Garax. And then there was a series of vehicles, and it was 2 sword ships, 2 helicopters, and then there was a random like a rock cruncher or something. It's hard to find information on the toy line. There will be a link in the show notes. There's one website that I managed to find, the Toy Collector's Guide. So there will be a link in the show notes to that. That is probably one of the few websites that I was able to find on this particular toy line. There's not a whole lot of information there, but it's definitely more than you can usually find. And of course, you find all of the toys on eBay and stuff like that, and all in, various states of, some are in packaging, some aren't, things like that. So, but I have, let me think. I have 5 of the action figures still on card. And then I have everybody but Gyrax. Because Gyrax, I guess, was a lot more rare. So when he pops up on eBay, he is usually selling for quite a bit more. I think the most that I paid for a figure, I think I may have paid like $85 for Ming. But Gyrax, the last time I saw him pop up on eBay, he was about $200, and that was not something that I was interested in. But with that being said, every once in a while, you will find the characters that will show up that are. I pay attention to these things long enough that I can figure out when a good price has popped up, and I'll usually scoop them up if I do. But I have Flash, Lothar. I just recently picked up Mandrake and the Phantom, and they are off card, but they're all in really, really nice. They're essentially brand new. Mandrake was the only one that I didn't buy on card and open it up, but it popped up on eBay, and the seller was like, yeah, this thing is essentially in mint condition. The pictures look good, so I scooped it up for a price that I was willing to pay. And I will say that the seller was spot on. The figure was just in fantastic shape. One thing about that particular figure was that he has a cane, and apparently that cane is usually missing. And I mean, if you saw it, you would know why. But it came with the cane, so that was a big selling point. But like the cape was in good shape. For me, the biggest thing is paint. I don't like it, like if the face or on the arms, because the arms were die-cast metal, they tend to be chipped. And that was not what I was interested in. I wanted something that was complete. So I got that, and so now I have all 4. I think they're fantastic. It is certainly a neat toy line. I think Galoob did a pretty good job. Galoob has a history, from what I understand, of kind of being a little bit more on the cheap side. But as a toy company, they have actually done other lines. Like there was they did a line of very, very early run Star Trek The Next Generation, like back like season 1, early Star Trek The Next Generation, before Playmates picked up the license. And I love them. And again, I got them for relatively cheap. Again, I was happy to pay, like I got them at a price that I was willing to pay. And I really appreciate them. And I like them so much that, again, I went back and I got another set, but I got another set that was off card. And so now they're hanging out on my desk at my work. So I'm a little bit of a nerd in that sense. But with all that being said, I'm probably getting a little bit too off topic, so I'm going to jump right back on topic and say that we're good now. This was, again, episode 2, The Creation of Monitor. So come back in 2 weeks' time, and we'll do the next episode, A Demon in His Pocket. But thanks for joining me.